He replaced me with his mistress on our honeymoon, so I replaced his freedom with regret. The applause was still echoing when Kwame went down on one knee. Cameras flashed. The bride, my sister Selena, was still holding her bouquet, her veil trembling in the coastal wind. Everyone thought it was the most romantic thing they had ever seen, a man proposing to his girlfriend right after her sister's wedding. But I remember standing there, my heart pounding like war drums, wondering why my sister wouldn't meet my eyes. When he opened the velvet box, I heard my mother gasp, "Finally, Amma. Finally." The word felt like a blessing and a warning all at once. He slipped the ring onto my finger, kissed my hand, and whispered, "Forever starts now." But when I looked up, Selena's eyes weren't celebrating. They were wet. Not with joy, but guilt. Then I saw it. A folded note slipping from Kwame's palm into hers as he stood. So small, so quick, anyone else would have missed it. But not me. That night, while everyone danced under fairy lights, laughter mixing with the ocean wind, I sat alone by the shore, holding a diamond that suddenly felt like a secret. No one knew the storm had only begun. In my family, appearances were everything. We weren't royalty, but my father's name carried weight along the Ghanaian coast. Our house sat on a hill overlooking the sea, its white pillars glowing gold at sunset. My sister Selena was the jewel of the family, beautiful, daring, adored by everyone. I was the shadow beside her light, the calm one, the one who held things together. Kwame entered our lives like a promise. He was confident, successful, and always knew the right words to charm my parents. He said he loved my simplicity, my quiet strength. He'd often say, "Amma, you're peace in a world full of noise." I believed him. Selena and I were close, or so I thought. She'd tease me about my plain dresses, my preference for books over brunches. She was bold, magnetic, always surrounded by admirers. Yet she always came to me for advice, on love, work, even on the man she claimed was a little too serious for her taste. That man turned out to be Kwame, but back then, I didn't know. Back then, everything looked perfect. The months after the wedding proposal passed in a blur of planning and celebrations. My mother couldn't stop smiling. She'd tell everyone that both her daughters were now settled, one newly married, the other soon to be. Our house smelled of new fabrics, spices, and perfume, preparations for another grand ceremony. Kwame insisted we have a small wedding, something private. "I don't like too much noise," he said, kissing my forehead. "Let's make it just about us." His tenderness disarmed me. I mistook it for love. Still, something in me wouldn't rest. The note from that wedding night haunted me. I tried to forget it, told myself I'd imagined things. But sometimes, when Kwame's phone buzzed, I'd catch a flicker of his eyes, the kind that hides something. Selena, too, had changed. She stopped coming around as often, blaming it on her new married life. When we did meet, her laughter felt rehearsed. She'd squeeze my hand and say, "I'm so happy for you, Amma. You deserve this." Yet her voice trembled each time. Our honeymoon was planned in Zanzibar, a dream destination I'd always talked about. But a week before the trip, Kwame said his business partner needed him for an urgent meeting in Nairobi. "Just for 2 days," he promised. "Then I'll meet you there." The night before his flight, we had dinner at my apartment. I'd made his favorite dish, jollof rice with fried plantain, and while he ate, I told him how excited I was for the honeymoon. He smiled, distracted. "It'll be perfect," he said softly. "You'll see." Later, as he showered, his phone lit up on the table. The name flashing on the screen froze my blood. Selena. I didn't touch it. I couldn't, but the call repeated, twice. Then a message followed. "Remember to pack what we discussed." "Don't forget." I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. My body felt cold, my mind blank. When he came out, I was still smiling, mechanically. He hugged me, whispered, "I'll miss you," and I nodded like everything was normal. When he left the next morning, I stood at the window watching his car disappear. That's when I realized something painful. The man I thought I was marrying had already left me long before the wedding. That night, I went to my parents' house under the pretense of dropping off documents. Selena's car was parked outside. I heard laughter inside, her laughter. But when I stepped in, the air went still. She looked startled, almost afraid. "Didn't expect you tonight," she said quickly. "Neither did I replied. Kwame's flight got delayed. For a second, her eyes flickered with panic before she covered it with a smile. Don't worry. He'll come back soon." The way she said he'll come back instead of you'll see him soon pierced something deep inside me. That's when I knew. She wasn't just hiding something. She was part of it. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, the diamond ring glinting under the light, and whispered to myself, if this love is a lie, I will find the truth, no matter how ugly it is. And with that vow, I opened the door to a secret that would destroy everything I once called family. The next morning, I packed my suitcase for Zanzibar, pretending nothing was wrong. But inside, my heart was a storm. Every folded dress, every perfume bottle felt like a lie I was wrapping myself in. Kwame's last text before his flight read, "Boarding now, my love. Can't wait to see you soon." Soon, the word stung, because I knew now he wasn't flying alone. Still, I boarded the plane. If Selena and Kwame were truly together, I wanted proof. I needed to see it with my own eyes. Zanzibar welcomed me with the scent of salt and hibiscus, waves crashing against white sand. Our villa was stunning. Open glass walls, silk curtains swaying in the sea breeze, 2 wine glasses waiting by the bed. But only one heartbeat echoed inside. Mine. For 2 days, I waited. Kwame didn't come. He didn't call. And Selena's phone went straight to voicemail. On the 3rd day, I went to the hotel reception, asking if anyone named Kwame Ofori had checked in. The woman behind the counter looked hesitant before saying, "Yes, ma'am. He arrived yesterday. With his wife, her wife." The world tilted. I heard waves but couldn't feel my feet. "Room number?" I asked, voice shaking. She refused politely, saying it was against policy. But I'd seen the booking register when she flipped a page too far. Room 14, Ocean View Wing. I waited until dusk before going there. The hallway smelled of coconut oil and sea breeze. From behind the door, I heard laughter, the kind I hadn't heard from Kwame in months. Then a woman's giggle, my sister's. I pressed my palm against the cool wood and listened. "Do you think she suspects?" Selena asked, her voice muffled but clear. Kwame chuckled softly. "Amma, she's too naive. By the time she finds out, it'll be too late." Then came the sound of a kiss. Something inside me shattered. I walked back to my villa, numb. The ocean roared outside, and I wished it would swallow the whole island. But as the night deepened, my tears hardened into resolve. They thought I was naive. They thought my silence meant weakness. They were wrong. The next morning, I went to the reception again, all smiles this time. "Hi, I'd like to make a change to our return tickets," I said. The clerk smiled. "Of course, ma'am. What would you like to do?" "Cancel his," I said. "Just mine should remain." Then I added, "And please send a message to Mr. Kwame Ofori's room. Tell him his flight was rescheduled. He'll understand." Her brows lifted slightly, but she nodded. When I stepped outside, the morning sun burned bright and merciless. I took off my engagement ring and let it fall into the sand. The sea carried it away, like the last piece of my illusion. That evening, while they lounged by the pool, sipping wine and pretending the world belonged to them, I walked into the hotel manager's office and slid an envelope across his desk. Inside were screenshots, emails, and photos, all proving that Kwame's company had been laundering funds through shell accounts. I'd spent the night uncovering every secret he thought I'd never touch. "I believe your guest in room 14 might be involved in fraud," I said calmly. "You might want to alert the authorities." The manager's expression changed instantly. When the police arrived at dawn, sirens broke the morning calm. Selena's scream echoed through the corridor. Kwame tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. I stood by my window, watching as they took him away, his wrists bound, his face pale. Selena followed, crying, calling my name. I didn't answer. I simply whispered to myself, "You took my love to the honeymoon. I took your freedom home." The tide washed against the shore as the first light touched the horizon. And for the first time in years, I felt peace. The morning after Kwame's arrest, the island was quiet. The sun rose over the turquoise waters like nothing had happened. But inside me, a storm still brewed, not of anger anymore, but disbelief. For years, I'd imagined revenge would feel like fire. Instead, it felt like silence, a hollow calm that echoed too loud. I thought it was over. But I was wrong. By noon, I received a call from the local authorities. They wanted me to come in for questioning. Standard procedure. they said. I expected to answer a few questions and leave, but when I arrived, the officer's tone was sharp. Mrs. Ama Ofori, he said, flipping through a folder. Do you know about a joint account opened under your name 6 months ago? My heart skipped. What account? He turned the papers toward me. My name, my signature, my ID attached. Except I had never seen those documents before. The numbers at the bottom chilled me. Hundreds of thousands of dollars moved through that account, most of it tied to Kwame's company. It seems, the officer continued, that you've been a co-owner of the same offshore account we arrested your husband for using. My throat tightened. That's impossible, but he just nodded, eyes hard. We'll be keeping you here until we can verify your story. That night, I sat in a cold cell staring at the cracks in the wall. Every sound, the clang of the lock, the buzz of the fluorescent light, felt like punishment. Not for what I'd done, but for what I'd loved. Kwame had forged my name. He hadn't only betrayed my heart, he'd made me part of his crimes. The realization burned worse than any heartbreak. I spent 3 nights there, with no visitors, no lawyer. The guards whispered when they passed me. That's the one. The woman who helped her husband steal from widows. I wanted to scream, to tell them I was innocent. But my voice felt trapped somewhere deep inside me. On the 4th day, I was released, temporarily, they said, pending investigation. I stepped back into the sunlight, dizzy and weak. My once perfect world was now ashes. As I walked out of the station, a woman approached me, middle-aged, elegant, wearing a white linen dress and gold earrings that caught the sun. Mrs. Ofori? She asked softly. Yes? My name is Ya. I used to work for your husband. At the firm. Something about her tone made me pause. She looked around before speaking again. I know what he did to you, but there's something else you need to know, about your sister. My stomach turned. Selena? Ya nodded. Kwame wasn't the only one who lied. We sat at a seaside cafe, the waves crashing softly below the wooden deck. Ya opened her purse and slid a small envelope across the table. Inside were printed emails, all from Selena to Kwame dating back 2 years. They weren't just lovers' messages. They were business exchanges. Selena had been the one moving the funds offshore, using my name. Kwame had trusted her more than anyone, even more than himself. The money trail began with her. She forged your signature, Ya whispered. Kwame may have stolen hearts, but Selena stole everything else. My hands trembled as I read line after line, account numbers, fake documents, even flight tickets she'd booked in my name. My sister had framed me to save herself. Tears blurred my vision. I thought I'd punished them both. But in truth, I'd only destroyed the puppet, while the puppeteer still danced free. That night, I walked along the beach, the waves washing over my ankles. The moon hung low, silver and heavy with judgment. I realized revenge was never the end of a story. It was only a doorway to something darker. Selena had taken everything, my husband, my reputation, even my freedom. But she had forgotten one thing. I was my mother's daughter. And my mother always said, when the snake bites your heel, don't stomp in rage. Step aside and let the gods strike it where it hides. The next morning, I called Ya. Help me, I said. I want to bring them both down, the right way. Ya smiled faintly. Then you must be ready to lose everything first, I nodded. I already have. And as the wind swept across the ocean, carrying away the last traces of who I used to be, I whispered into the dawn, this time, it won't be revenge. It will be justice. The waves roared in reply, and the sea seemed to promise me one thing. The story wasn't over. Not yet. They told me patience was a woman's secret weapon. My mother used to say it with a cup of tea in her hand, as if patience were something you warmed before using. By the time the climax came, patience had become my shield and my blade. I moved quietly, deliberately. Ya and I assembled everything, not scraps and furies, but paper and proof. Bank statements printed in neat stacks, emails with headers intact, flight confirmations with timestamps, and a directory of shell corporations that mapped Selena's handwriting like a spider's web. Ya had contacts at the firm who owed her more than loyalty. They owed her truth. They slid us ledgers and internal memos late at night, the kind of files men burn when they think no one watches the smoke. First, we went to the attorney. Barrister Mensah was a stern woman who used the law like a bell. When she struck, it echoed. She read our pile without surprise, then said, "This is not gossip, Amma. This is a scandal. We need the right stage." The right stage, she explained, was not the police station. It was the family's annual foundation gala, the very night my parents planned to announce a new coastal development in my father's name. The whole town would be there. Dignitaries, press, the very pillars who once clapped for Selena. If we were to unmask them, we would do it where their applause had once protected them. On the night of the gala, the veranda lanterns burned like 100 tiny suns. My parents glided through the crowd in their satin finery, my mother's smile wide, my father's hand on his cane, a portrait of a family that had never seemed more fragile. Selena arrived in a dress that shimmered like the ocean. She was the jewel again, laughing, the perfect portrait of innocence. Kwame sat at a round table near the band, hands folded, eyes scanning the room like a man who had just been given back the stage after a stumble. I walked in wearing nothing dramatic, a simple black dress, hair pulled back, a string of pearls my grandmother had given me on my 20th birthday. The pearls felt heavy with memory, and maybe that weight steadied me. Barrister Mensah met my eye and gave me the smallest nod. Ya stood behind me like a shadow who would not leave. The MC lifted his glass to cheer the foundation's work. Cameras clicked. The chatter softened into applause. I stepped up, because if there is one thing I had learned, it was that silence can be weaponized, but only when someone decides to speak. "Good evening," I said, and my voice slid across the room like a cool current. I didn't plan to take this stage tonight, but there's something urgent that I must say, and it affects all of you. My mother's smile tightened. Selena's laughter died like a candle. Kwame's jaw clenched, Barrister Mensah signaled, and a screen behind me flickered to life. The projector hummed. Up bloomed the first image. An email header with Selena's name, sent to an offshore coordinator. Subject line, transfer, Coastal Holdings, account 4147. The room tasted suddenly like metal. I let it sit. People glanced at each other. Murmurs rose like a tide. Then the next slide. Flight receipts with my name on them. Tickets I had never bought. Transfers made from a company account to a wedding planner who had charged outrageous sums for a party we never received. Each slide was a blade. Each blade cut. "What is this?" my father demanded, his voice a thin thread. "Proof," Barrister Mensah said, stepping forward. "Proof that sums were moved into shell accounts, routed through companies controlled by Selena Ofori. Proof that Mrs. Amma Ofori's name and signature were forged on documents opening accounts where funds were laundered. Proof that Mr. Kwame Ofori used company funds for personal trips and that these trips were coordinated with Miss Selena Ofori." Her words were methodical, surgical. Selena's face drained. She began to shuffle, to breathe. The band stopped playing. Someone in the crowd whispered, "No, that can't be." Another voice, "This has to be a mistake." They looked to my parents for denial. They looked in the wrong direction. Selena's first reaction was not fury, but a quiet calculation, the kind people learn when their life has been a performance for too long. She opened her mouth and tried to speak, and her voice came out a murmur. "Amma, you're not saying anything," I interrupted. "Because nothing you say can explain tapes of you approving transfers in your own handwriting." I watched her eyes flick to my mother, searching for rescue and finding only reflection. My mother's hands trembled around her champagne glass. Kwame, suddenly small, stood as if to protest. "This is slander," he said. "She's manic, Barrister Mensah cut him off. "We have legal documents, Mr. Ofori. The police are on their way. If you have nothing to hide, tell the truth." Someone in the crowd called for the police. The hush broke into a swarm of commotion. My father tried to approach me, to touch my arm as if my presence had been an accident. I pulled away. His hand hovered, then retracted. The air felt as if it had been cleaved. Later, when the officers came, Selena cried. Not the deep, hopeless cry of someone who had been wronged, but the sharp, high one of someone who had been discovered. She spoke quickly at first, scripting explanations that twisted into contradictions. Kwame shifted his weight from foot to foot, pleading, bargaining. The man who once promised forever now muttering about misunderstandings and tempers. Outside, the press took photos, the flashes making the night sharp and small. People gathered at the edge of the veranda, faces lit with furious curiosity. The family's comfortable life, the life of donations, galas, handshakes, was peeking open like a trapdoor. In the end, the law did what words could not. It froze accounts and issued subpoenas. Selena was escorted gently, but firmly, out the garden path by officers who had seen worse and still looked surprised at the tenderness of her lies. Quame's name was added to the list. His arrest followed not in the dramatic way of handcuffs and struggle, but with the quiet efficiency of a system that had finally been fed truth. When my father sat alone at the top of the veranda steps, the cane unused at his side, I felt no triumph. The hollow I'd anticipated was not full of victory. It was an emptiness where my sister once might have lived. I felt cold and strangely detached, as if the ocean had finally taken something I didn't miss because I never owned it. As guests left murmuring and the orchestra packed quietly away, my mother found me by the sea. Her lipstick was smeared, her eyes red. She reached for my hand as if to anchor herself. "Amma," she said, voice small, "why didn't you tell me?" I turned and met her eyes, the woman who taught me to be patient, to sip tea and listen. And for the first time, I allowed myself to be honest. "Because you wouldn't have listened," I said. "You loved the sound of applause more than the tremor in my voice." She pressed both hands over her mouth, and for a long minute neither of us moved. The ocean sighed like an old thing that had watched too many storms. "You did what you had to," she whispered finally. "We will rebuild." I thought of the proverb my father used to mutter like a curse. When a palm tree falls, the roots still remember where the rain fell. Roots remember. I realized then the work ahead wasn't tearing down. It was learning how to plant again where the soil was honest. As the moon rode high over the water, I walked away from the veranda with the taste of salt on my lips and a folder of documents clutched to my chest. The gala lights blinked behind me like guilty stars. The truth had been revealed. The family had been split. But the night also held a strange possibility. When everything falls into honest light, sometimes what remains can grow into something truer. I didn't dance that night. I walked into the dark, letting the waves sound out a rhythm my heart could finally follow. The rain began long before dawn, slow and steady, washing away the last traces of laughter from the veranda. The gala banners hung limp and torn. The chairs, once wrapped in gold fabric, sagged beneath the weight of the storm. By morning, the Euphoria estate looked less like a mansion and more like a monument to secrets that had finally drowned. Amma stood at the top of the grand staircase, suitcase in one hand, a single envelope in the other. The air was thick with silence, that uneasy quiet after a house has stopped pretending. Her mother sat in the parlor, clutching a handkerchief, eyes fixed on the rain trickling down the windows. The maids whispered in corners, packing up what could be salvaged. The smell of wet wood and cold tea filled the hallways. On the mahogany table lay the folder Barrister Mensah had left behind. Legal documents, bank freezes, property orders, and at the very bottom, a single sheet that glimmered like hope beneath the ruin, the original estate title. Her father's signature, the real one, still visible in faded ink. The one Selena had tried to forge months ago to transfer ownership behind closed doors. They had stolen almost everything from Amma, her peace, her trust, her name, but this piece of parchment was still hers by birthright and by fight. She picked it up gently, feeling the roughness of the paper under her fingertips. It was heavier than it looked, like it carried the weight of every betrayal that had brought her here. She folded it once, slid it into the inner pocket of her coat, and took one last look at the house that had built her, broken her, and birthed her new self. Behind her, her mother whispered her name. "Amma, please, don't go." Amma turned slowly, her eyes soft but unreadable. "There's nothing left to stay for," she said quietly. "This house will need more than walls to stand again." Her mother rose, reaching out as if to bridge years of silence. "I didn't know," she said, voice trembling. "About your sister, about any of it." Amma's gaze was steady. "You knew something was wrong," she said. "You just didn't want to see it." For a long moment, they stood in the heavy quiet, the rain tapping the glass like a metronome marking an ending. Then Amma turned away. The sound of her heels against the marble echoed through the hollow house. 1, 2, 3, like the ticking of a clock she'd finally stopped listening to. When she stepped outside, the sky broke open. The rain soaked her hair, her coat, her suitcase, but she didn't care. The gravel road glistened like silver beneath the storm, leading down to the iron gates where a single cab waited, engine humming softly. She paused halfway down the drive and looked back. Through the rain, she saw silhouettes. Her mother slumped by the window, her father sitting motionless on the veranda steps, his cane beside him, his empire crumbling in silence. Somewhere inside, a door slammed. Another life ending. Amma inhaled deeply. The air was sharp and clean, smelling of wet earth and freedom. She pulled the old estate title from her pocket and held it against her chest, the ink bleeding slightly from the rain. It wasn't just a document, it was proof, not of ownership, but of survival. Proof that she had come through the fire and chosen to walk instead of burn. As she reached the gate, thunder rolled low across the horizon. The driver stepped out, offering her an umbrella. She shook her head. "No," she said. "Let it fall." She climbed into the car, placed the soaked title on her lap, and watched as the estate faded in the rear mirror, a blur of stone, rain, and ghosts. By the time the car reached the main road, Amma smiled faintly. She wasn't escaping. She was reclaiming. And as the rain fell harder, the world finally felt clean again. In the end, Amma didn't need revenge. The truth did all the work. The storm that washed her family's name from the estate also cleansed her spirit of their deceit. She learned that sometimes justice doesn't roar. It whispers slowly until those who built their lives on lies crumble under their own silence. As her car disappeared down the soaked highway, the past stayed behind, in that mansion of fading portraits and empty promises. Amma had carried nothing but her father's true legacy: dignity, honesty, and peace. Because when blood betrays you, silence becomes the loudest answer. And when love dies in deceit, truth becomes your only inheritance. Until next time, remember, not every battle is fought with rage. Some victories are born in quiet exits and unbroken souls.